feel very comfortable straight away for two reasons. I didn't think that was very respectful to Derek, but also I didn't think it was my role in HR to do the line manager's responsibility. But anyway, I just had one of those moments, you know, you get a little bit of inspiration, and I said, has anybody asked Derek how he feels about this new role as team leader? He hadn't had any training, he'd been promoted from a technical position, and he was now leading 5 people in a team. And they went, well, no. So I said, well, can we use that as our starting point and see how he feels? And of course, when we spoke to Derek, he said, do you know, I'm absolutely hating it. It's not for me, but I feel too ashamed and shameful to admit it. And after talking with him, he realised actually how courageous he was to say, I'd rather go back to my technical role. So feedback there could have been very, very damaging for Derek if it had been handled in a bad way. So that's where I got my interest from. So that's what I'm going to introduce you to this afternoon. So what we're going to talk about is, well, how we can use the relationship to make the activity of feedback more comfortable. Now, I'm going to bring you a UK perspective because that's where I did my research. So I will be engaging you, hopefully, in thinking about how this relates to the culture where you're from or where you work. And I'm going to introduce you to the PPR relational framework, which was created from the research that I did. PPR stands for preparation, proactivity, and reactive. And we're going to talk about the preparation part of that this afternoon, because as you can imagine, we haven't got time to do the whole framework. And 3 elements are part of the competency part of the relational framework, as I've mentioned. And we're going to talk about a theme that is part of the preparation element, the theme of compassion. I've chosen that deliberately because of where we are, because I'm curious, and I hope you are too, in thinking about what comparison there might be between the UK culture on compassion and the culture that you have here in the Far East. So, let's take a little journey and think about how we become who we are. Okay, so if we look at Sartre's view, he says, well, and the guy, Kearney, who interpreted what Sartre said, he's saying, you know, you're in charge of yourself, basically. You make yourself what you are. You can choose who you want to be. So do we think that's true? We can choose who we want to be? Of course it is. We can choose what we want to be. However, what happens to us over our life that might impact on that? So the power of the journey of who we are, well, it starts with the family, doesn't it? So let me give you an example from mine. I'm the youngest of 5 children. So I had 3 older brothers and an elder sister. My sister Mary was really like a mother to me because, as my own mother said to me, do you know what? You really weren't expected. You were a big surprise. So I kind of didn't feel totally welcomed into the world when I understood what that might mean. But my lovely sister Mary, she was like a mother for me because she was old enough to be my mother, actually. And she gave me the feedback of love. Yeah? And then my eldest brother, Billy, he knew I loved reading, and he was very practical, so he made me a bookcase in his woodwork class at school so that I could put all my books in it. Well, there was my feedback. Love again. Sorry, I'm rushing on. And then my next brother, John, well, John thought he was my style guru. So he would tell me exactly what he thought I looked like, including, I wouldn't wear that if I were you because you look rather fat in that. So, you know, he was my benchmark as I grew up about what I should wear. I'm sure that's had some deep psychological effect on me, which is still affecting me now, but you'll be the best judge of that. Then my next brother, Teddy, well, his idea as fun was to make me lie on the floor, face down, get a piece of rope, tie my feet together, feet up my back, put the rope around my throat, tie my hands behind my back, so that if I moved my legs down, it pulled my throat back. If I moved my head down, it pulled my legs back. And you know, that was kind of pretty strong feedback. It kind of told me that I was a bit of a nuisance in his life, because he was always supposed to take me out to play. And you know what? Young boys don't want their little sister tagging along. So it starts in the family. I'm sure you've all got stories like mine that you can share. So we're already starting to understand what feedback does to us and how we react to it. Then, of course, we go to school. Well, when I was a little girl, I used to sing all the time. I used to skip to school like little girls do and go, "Can't buy me love, can't buy me love." You know how little girls do. And I loved singing, and I thought I could sing. And at our school, we had a school choir. And you were chosen to be in the school choir through an audition, and you could either be a nightingale, who had this beautiful, sweet song, or you could be a lark, that was just about passable, or you could be a crow. Crows did not get into the school choir. I think you know what's coming, don't you? So I went along to the audition, and I just kind of froze, and then when I did sing, a croak came out of my throat. I was a crow, and I never went in the school choir. So after that time, I used to love singing, and I didn't love it anymore, because I thought, you can't sing. I was only 9, so I believed what I was told. Okay, so I hope you're feeling quite sorry for me now, are you? Hope so, yeah. So we're not going anywhere. Then we go to work. So by the time we get to work, it's pretty ingrained in us about what feedback means. And what do we listen to? Do we listen to the compliments, or do we listen to the criticism? What do we listen to? Just going to ask Michelle, what do we listen to? Compliments or criticism?
Compliments, of course.
He's a liar. I tell you. I know him well. He just makes it up. Okay, that's brilliant, Michelle. I'm so pleased you listen to compliments. But I think a lot of us do ignore, I'm getting some nods, thank you. We do ignore the compliment side, and we're going to hear one criticism, that's the one that sticks with us. Okay? And we know from neuroplasticity that we reinforce what we're told. We create a neural pathway, as you know, and that's reinforced. And every time we think about, say, feedback in this instance, that invokes the emotion that makes us feel bad about getting feedback. I am obviously only talking about feedback we're not happy with. So we can change that if we want to. Again, neuroplasticity tells us with practice, we can create new neural pathways, and that's the idea to do it. So I'd like you just to have a quick chat with the person that's next to you, just a couple of minutes, and talk about what's your experience of feedback. Just share some ideas. So can we come back together again? I'm sorry we're short on time today because we started late, so I'd like to have left you to talk longer, but I think we have to move on. You see, you ask coaches to start talking and we can't stop. All right, so let's think about it works, doesn't it? Ooh. So let's think about the results of that journey of feedback that we're all on. And well, many of us feel fear of giving it because, well, we don't want to upset people. We don't want to spoil relationships. So we don't do it. Many of us feel anxious about receiving it. Have you ever been with somebody who says to you, I'd like to give you some feedback, and you look at them and you think, oh my God, you look just like my father, and it's going to be bad news, I know it is. So you're already transferring onto this individual what you thought about your father and what he said to you. I can see another nod there, yeah, my father was like that too. So also, many of us will avoid giving it. That's what happens. We'd rather not give it unless it's good feedback. The ironic thing is that organizations and clients expect us to give feedback. I say it's important. We can't improve, we can't do anything different if we don't know how we're doing. But the reality, only in my experience of where I've worked, shows me it doesn't happen as effectively or as regularly as organizations believe it does. You can have the best performance management system in place, but if it's not applied, it doesn't work. And even if you had a chat by the coffee machine to help somebody move forward in a particular area, that's much better than trying to fill out all the paperwork and then giving up with it. So, even if it's good news, some of us can feel discomfort. So even if you say to somebody, do you know what, I think you're doing a really good job, that was a wonderful piece of work that you did, excellent, I want you to show others how to do it, it can sometimes be really embarrassing. But we know the answer is just say thank you, yeah? So this is the result of the journey of feedback. So I thought, so what can we do about it? For my research, I didn't want to look at another process. We've all heard about feed forward. We've all heard about the blank sandwich. You know, so many good things and some criticism in the middle, and then some good things at the end. We know about the processes. We feel in ourselves, come on, just give us the bad news. Let's get on with it. So I thought there must be something in the relationship. If we've got a really good relationship with somebody, we can actually feel okay. It may not feel particularly comfortable, some of the things that we hear, but if we have that good relationship, we're more prepared to engage in a feedback discussion than we are if we don't have a good relationship. So obviously the relationship is important. So how do we get there? As we know, we've got to engender trust in each other, and the way that we do that is that we've got to find that people are reliable, they're telling the truth, and they have the ability. That's how we build trust and respect for somebody. But that doesn't happen in 5 minutes, doesn't it? It doesn't just happen because somebody says, trust me. In fact, usually when somebody says, trust me, we kind of get a bit suspicious and think, yeah, I can see by your reaction. We sometimes think, oh no, that's just not going to work for me. So we have to work at it, don't we? We have to make it happen. So the EMCC gives us some indicators about building the relationship. This is one of the 8 EMCC competencies. And here, the EMCC is saying skillfully builds and maintains an effective relationship. But how do we do that? Yeah, we know we've got to do that, but how does that happen? And the rest, yeah, using the language of the other person, listening and watching body language, and showing empathy. We're getting nearer now to how we do it, and respects the client's pace and readiness for share. So all that makes sense, but I felt, again, it's what you do. I'd like to know more about how you do it. So I noticed that there wasn't much in the coaching literature that talked about the relationship. There was loads in counselling literature and psychotherapy literature, but not very much in coaching. So I turned to the psychotherapy literature and I found this material on relational depth, particularly like the words of the work of Mearns and Cooper. And I knew, and I'd like you to think about it, when I was working at my best, and you know the magic of coaching, when the magic of coaching works, I felt totally connected with the client. There was something going on. I knew when it was there. I knew when that feeling wasn't there, but I couldn't articulate it. I couldn't say, this is what it is. I just had a knowing, yeah? So, seeking that relational depth, I did my research with 2 field studies of coaches with their clients. And we did it through gathering data from their practice and through their reflections on their practice. And I asked them to focus on feedback and make observations about how their clients reacted to it, the timing of it, etc. So we were after knowing when the conditions are right for feedback. And I remember one of my coaches saying to me, but Lise, I just know. So I said, so how do you explain that no? And they went, this is hurting my head. I can't find the words. So again, we just had to gather in data until we found out. And what we came up with was this relational framework, a way of being. Now, the whole framework has 20 themes which were identified from the research data, which guide us into a way of being to create a relationship that supports the conditions for receptivity of feedback. Because there were 20 themes, I thought, well, that's quite a lot of themes to work with, so I distilled those into 10, and then they went within 3 elements. The 3 elements I remember I mentioned at the beginning: preparation, proactive, and reactive. And we're going to take a little look, looking at the time, a little look at the preparation one. The proactive side is what is instigated in the conversation by the coaching client to help build the relationship. And that could be things like making sure you're being objective, it could be knowing when the timing of the feedback comes, etc. And the reactive side is reacting, literally as it says, to what emerges in the conversation. So what am I noticing about the client? You know, what am I noticing in their body language, etc. Also, what came up in there was a thing called metaphysical, which was about there's an energy that surrounds us that is creating or disrupting this relationship. How do we harness that? So let me move on quickly and get to the preparation theme. The preparation theme, the preparation element has the themes there: readiness for feedback. And the theme underlying that is, how do we know? We can't assume how the person is going to react to the feedback that we're giving, but what might they think? You know, let's just prepare ourselves before the conversation to think, I wonder how they're going to react. Are they going to be pleased about this? Are they going to take it as criticism? How are they going to be? And remember that we have our stuff in there. What we might see as a criticism, somebody else might be really happy about, and vice versa. What we think's okay may be quite distressing for somebody else. And also, when we're preparing for a conversation, it's about self-management. It's about what's our mental and our emotional well-being at that time. Are we stressed? Are we overworked? Great workload? Are we going into that conversation not really being focused on our clients? Centering's a great one for that. We've been doing some meditation over the last couple of days. I think if we all did that before we had some of our conversations, they would flow a lot more smoothly. And it's something about having the confidence. If you know it's going to be a difficult conversation, it takes some confidence to be able to do that. It doesn't happen on its own. but taking these areas into consideration when we're preparing is going to help us. And the last one there is about compassion, and that's the one we're going to talk about. It's about compassion for ourselves as the givers of the feedback, and also compassion for the receiver, for both of us. And here's some definitions here. And I like the one about, it's really no different than having compassion for others. Having compassion for yourself is the same as having compassion for others. And can be an emotional response when perceived suffering. And what happens there is that the brain actually releases oxytocin, which is a hormone. This is from neuroscience. And that hormone gives us a feeling of sympathy and wanting to help somebody in distress. So that's what happens when we're feeling that somebody else might be in distress. And we can use that to best effect when we think about how it's going to land when we're talking with the other person. So again, this is a moment, I'm saying that in England, in the data that we got from our field research, that people were identifying a compassionate approach need to be taken. Can you just again have a chat with the person by you just for a couple of minutes and say, what does compassion, how does it impact in your own culture on giving and receiving feedback? Just a couple of minutes, how does it work for you? Okay. Ooh. Let's come back together because we've got a bigger exercise to do in a moment. Ooh. I think the guy on the camera is riveted by this session, don't you? He's really enjoying this. He's meditating, indeed. It's a shame to wake him up, really, isn't it? Okay, so I'd like you just to think about your conversations on compassion, and I obviously don't know what they are, but let's have a look at this green paragraph here. Given the speed of economic growth that's moving from the west to the east, how do you think this might change, if at all, your approach to compassion for yourself and others? Anyone got a quick answer? Do they think it's going to change? Come on, Michelle.
Well, probably compassion will fade over time in the East. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Michelle. So Michelle says he thinks that compassion will fade over time in the East, which is indeed what's happened in the West. Yeah? So now that's having a turnaround where people are getting fed up with commercialism being the only thing that's important in life, and they're turning back to spirituality and looking for more meaning in life in the West. So it's a kind of move around, isn't it? The compassion is coming back into the West, and maybe you'll see an erosion of compassion in your part of the world. Let's just see. I just thought I'd put it up there for you to think about it. So moving on then, I'd like to share with you a common scenario that happens in business before I ask you to do some work yourselves on how you prepare for a conversation that might be a little bit difficult. So what happens to the other person, okay, when they're not considered in the conversation? So the first thought of the person who's giving feedback might be, now, how am I going to get the message across to Jay that the behaviour they're displaying in the team is disruptive and having a negative effect on others. How am I going to do this? So this person's clearly feeling, how am I going to do this? What are they feeling? I'll give you a clue. They're going to feel anxious. I know there's something wrong. I've got to give them feedback that they're not working with the team, but how am I going to do it? How am I going to do it so they're not thinking anything about the person they're giving it to? Jay hasn't entered their head at this time. So their second thought is, well, I can give examples of what team members are complaining about, but I really don't feel comfortable about giving this type of criticism. So here, this person's saying, starting to rationalise it. Well, I can give him examples, which is all good stuff, isn't it? That's what we'd want to know if someone's going to tell us we're not doing very well in the team. But this person doesn't feel comfortable about giving this type of criticism. So it doesn't really feel like it's going to happen, does it? And what have they thought about the person who is receiving it? Poor old Jay, nothing. Jay still hasn't come into the picture. This person's just thinking about themselves. So the third thought is, I know, a better approach may be to organise a team coaching. And I'll brief the facilitator about Joe during the diagnostic phase of planning the programme. So what's happened by now is complete abdication, nothing to do with me. I'm going to hand Jay over to somebody else and they can tell Jay all about it. Common scenario, yeah? So what's happened to Jay all this time? Not in the picture. Poor Jay. Seriously, they don't know what's coming their direction. Now, I am not for one moment inferring that you would do this, of course. This is just a scenario that I happen to have come across in my experience. I know you wouldn't dream of it. But I would like you to think about, when I get there, I would like you to think about a scenario when you gave feedback. How much thought before you gave it did you give to the person who was receiving it? Your emotional state at the time. How were you feeling? Has somebody really just cheesed you off? Had you had an argument at home? Had your boss told you to do something you didn't really want to do? You know, how were you feeling? And what was the emotional state of the other person? Did you even think about that, let alone know about it? And then how might you give the feedback? Did you do that kind of preparation? And then how they might receive the feedback. Now, because we're doing, we're short on time, we're starting late, I'm going to give you the second activity as well and run the two together, and then we'll take some feedback at the end, okay? So the other scenario is, think of a time when you were given feedback. So the first one is about when you give it. The second one is about when you were given it. What preparation do you think the person who gave you the feedback did for the discussion? What indication, if any, did they give to thinking about how you might feel about the feedback? Do you think they thought about that? Did they care about you? How you might receive it, how you might feel? And what were your feelings about the person giving you the feedback? So over to you. Work in twos or threes, however you feel comfortable on your table. If you're on your own, which I can see someone on his own, please join another table and join in the discussion with somebody and see how far you get with it. And then I'll stop you, say, in 10 minutes, okay, and we'll take some feedback. All right? Off you go. Okay. Can we come back together again? So, who would like to share a story about their personal experience of feedback? Yeah? Who would like to share their story? Okay, Liza, I'm on my way.
Hi, I just wanted to tell a story about, this situation of, think of a situation when I had to give feedback to somebody, and it was to a client. And the client actually was somebody who was refused promotion by the senior team. And the basis of the senior team's rejection was that this person cannot be trusted. Very interesting, because nobody up there wanted to tell him that the reason for rejecting him was that they couldn't trust him. So when I probed, I said, why? Tell me what this trust is all about. They said, oh, he scored so perfectly in all the assessment tests. Something is not right in their gut feeling. And when I drilled down, it was because of feedback from the peers who said that this individual is all about me, me, me. So when you actually have to communicate that to the person, because the client themselves at senior level were cowards, they wanted to avoid the conversation. So they actually dumped it on a coach, right, to do that. You had to be very, very careful, because you really had to put yourselves in the shoes of this person who had just been rejected, had no idea why he was rejected, was given a run around like, you don't have enough experience, blah, 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 and it wasn't authentic. So you really had to be very careful to do that.
Thank you, Eliza. That's a really excellent example of how people abdicate from their responsibility and are actually really disrespectful and insensitive to the individual, because they just make up stories to fit the situation to suit themselves. And that's a disservice to not only themselves but to everybody else, because they're going to treat everyone else the same, and that person's going to go on throughout their life not understanding what the issues are. It's really not helpful. So again, it's a reason for, if you can create a really good relationship, and it's unfair to expect a coach to walk straight into that, if you can create a really healthy, positive relationship, you've got more chance of being honest. And people are happy when you're honest, in terms of however discomfort and uncomfortable it is at the time, at least don't you? You know what people think, and you can do something about it. But when everyone's talking behind your back, or not talking at all, it's not good. Okay, thank you, Eliza. One more story before we take some feedback. Yeah, you must have a story, Joe. You've always got a story.
I'm going to tell
this is your revenge on me.
You can't tell my story. You can't tell my story.
No, I'll be banned from telling the story. We had some very deep and meaningful conversations here about giving feedback on husbands' driving abilities. People thought we were solving all kinds of humanity issues, but we got right to the big stuff. And how not to, when giving feedback on, I won't say husband, because that will give away which person we were talking to. And giving feedback in the car, in the moment, is sometimes not the best place to do that. And what's a better way of solving this issue, and especially with partners and spouses, someone you're very close to. So how do you give feedback on sometimes the little things that have a big impact on your life?
We're not married to each other.
But it suddenly feels that way.
Oh, it's lovely, isn't it? Things that happen on conferences. I hasten to add, we didn't include marital relationships in this research. We felt that was just a step too far. We'd leave that one out. Not go in there, it's enough to do it from an organisational point of view. So I'm afraid we've run out of time. I'm going into Q&A now, but before I do, I've left some handouts on the table here at the front on how to develop compassion, how to develop that ability. You may say, well, it's an innate skill. You may say, we can develop it. Please take one. and see how it helps you in your work. If there aren't enough handouts there, if you'd like to leave your name, contact details, or a business card, I'll send you one, okay? They're over there on that table where all the water bottles are, okay? So, whilst everyone's going over there, are there any questions on the session or any comments that people would like to make? I've lost you all now. Trainers' first message is don't give out handouts when you're still speaking. For goodness sake, Liz. I need retraining, obviously. What's the feedback in that? I've just got it. Don't do it. I should have left that till the end. Anyway, don't forget to leave your business card. It looks as if they've all gone, if you need one. So, any questions?
So my question would be, if I give feedback, it always has something to do with me as well, how I perceive the person. So how do I deal with this part? I believe you could improve here, and what is it telling about myself? So where is the truth in there?
Thank you. Yeah, I think it is really important to think about where you're coming from, because I don't know if any of you have read any of Spinelli's work, but he talks about reality. You know, we've all got our own reality and our own perceptions, and it's real for us at the time, isn't it? So I think that's a really great approach to take in terms of not assuming your opinion is correct. Yeah, it is just our opinion. So well done you, a great approach. Any other questions or comments before we wrap up finally? Okay, there's nothing more to be said about feedback this afternoon, clearly. I'd just like to say thank you so much for being here. I hope you found the session of some help to you in your practice. And, well, enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.